Welcome to this explainer of A Bondage of Silk. To really get into the intricate gears of this story, we're doing something a little different today. I'm going to step right into the shoes of our protagonist, Ophelia Thorne, to guide you through her radical metamorphosis. So just picture it, all right? The ambient hiss of steam, the distant clicking of self-winding clocks, and the heavy scent of incoming rain. I am Ophelia, and this is the story of how my entire world was completely unmade. Before I was Delilah, I was Ophelia Thorne, the perfect society daughter, or so they thought. Whenever I look back at those words, it actually gives me a bit of a chill. It just perfectly captures that split identity at the core of my story. There's the person the world demanded I be, versus the person simmering light beneath the surface, just desperate to breathe. It's that classic tension between expectation and your true nature that I think so many of us can relate to. Section 1, The Gilded Cage. Okay, let's dive right into this. To understand why the Clockwork Carnival called to me, you really have to understand this overarching feeling of being trapped. My life at Westbrook Manor was literally a masterpiece of social engineering. The grand balls, the corseted bodies, the rehearsed smiles, everyone was just performing their designated function like cogs in a machine. My father was totally consumed by business, my mother by social climbing. It wasn't a home, it was a gilded cage where the air was entirely too thin to breathe. I was absolutely suffocating. So, on one side, you have Ophelia Thorne, the perfect daughter, weighed down by aristocratic expectations, arranged marriages, and rigid rules. But on the other side, Delilah. That's the name I took when I sought refuge with the performers. Delilah is the carnival siren. She represents absolute freedom and unapologetic rebellion. Stepping into the carnival wasn't just, a change of scenery. It was a total shedding of my former skin. Section 2, A Clockwork Awakening. But of course, freedom is rarely simple, and mine showed up in the shape of a man named Raven. From the second he strode into my tent, this dark, enigmatic guy moving with this intense, predatory grace, everything shifted. The very rhythm of my heart slowed down just to match his magnetic pull. "I am not your plaything, Raven." I actually remember saying that, my breath totally quivering with nervous excitement. We had this fierce, flirtatious banter. It was like a playful tug-of-war where he was constantly challenging me to just surrender to the storm of my own desires. He didn't want the polished society girl. He wanted my pristine world to crumble so I could finally see what lay beyond the boundaries I was so used to. And honestly, being around him was an absolute sensory overload. It wasn't just how he looked with that stormy gaze and the intricate cogwork and ravens tattooed on his skin. It was the scent of him, this wild, heady clash of leather, whiskey, and primal machine oil. To me, Raven represented ultimate freedom from my old life. But the irony? His intoxicating allure introduced a terrifying new kind of control over my senses. Section 3. The Collision of Worlds. So, just as I'm beginning to find my footing in this thrilling new reality, my old life violently crashes the party. And the escalation was terrifyingly fast. I was half hidden behind a mechanical fortune-telling booth when I saw her. My sister, Iris. She was in this elegant blue dress that just screamed high society, cutting through the carnival crowd with my former fiancé right behind her. She publicly confronted me, demanding I go back to our dying father. But then, it gets worse. Bartholomew Steele, this ruthless industrialist, steps up and threatens the entire carnival with eviction over an expired lease. He was going to destroy the only home I truly loved. Right then and there, in that agonizing moment, I made my choice. I stood with my found family. I yanked this decorative brass lever, the floor dropped away with a huge pneumatic whoosh, and Raven and I literally plunged into the carnival's mechanical underworld. Which brings us to a huge why this matters moment. As we fell into those tunnels, this terrifying question hit me. Was I escaping a cage or entering a new one? It's a universal fear we all face when we make radical life changes, right? We run from the expectations that stifle us, hoping for liberation. But then we wonder if we've just blindly traded one trap for an even darker, more complex snare. As Raven and I navigated the hissing copper pipes, I felt protected, but I was about to learn exactly how deep the carnival's secrets truly ran. Section 4. Shadows in the Steam. Deep beneath the glittering surface, I made a horrifying discovery. What started as a rebellious escape morphed into straight-up terror. In this vast underground lab lit by electric blue vapor, I saw the glass tanks, and inside, the Evolved. Human figures suspended in glowing liquid, their actual flesh grotesquely fused with clockwork machinery and brass wiring. This was the work of Madame Vespera, the carnival's proprietor. She was pursuing immortal transcendence by literally butchering her own performers. It violently grounded all that fantastical steampunk wonder into stark, chilling horror. Section 5, A Mechanical Heart. Seeing those tanks completely shattered my illusion of freedom. But the emotional core of the story, that was confronting the tragic reality of Raven. The carnival releases no one. When he said those words, his voice cracked with this rare, painful vulnerability. This fierce, independent man was actually a prisoner himself. He confessed that Vespera had raised him to be her eyes and hands, and he told me about Blackbird, the woman he once loved. When she tried to escape, Vespera punished her by transforming her into a mechanical puppet. Vespera's control wasn't just physical, it was an absolute, terrifying dominion over their very souls. But for Raven, the devastation was incredibly physical. He unbuttoned his shirt to reveal this intricate clockwork device embedded directly into his chest. His heart had been modified. Get this, if he left the carnival grounds for more than 12 hours, the mechanism would fail and he would die. His literal heart was tethered to a place he completely loathed. He stayed, because leaving meant death. He had spent his life luring people in for Vespera, trapped by this mechanical heart right up until I came along, and he dared to want something real. Section 6. The interrogation awaits. Knowing all that, the stakes totally changed. This was no longer just about my rebellion. It was about survival. So I made the agonizing choice to pack my leather valise and leave. Not to run away, but to protect the man I had grown to love so fiercely. But escaping wasn't going to be easy. Waiting up in the main pavilion was the Clockwork Interrogator. Picture this absolute brass and copper monstrosity, a throne-like chair surrounded by delicate needles and glass vials designed to measure your pulse, pupil dilation, and skin temperature. It was built to rip the absolute truth out of you, and my sister and the authorities were threatening to use it to uncover all the carnival's secrets. My logic was brutally clear. I had to leave to protect Raven. If the authorities shut the carnival down, his daily mechanical maintenance would stop and he would die. Plus, I needed to uncover the truth of who I was before I could fully become Delilah. And, above all, I needed to flee Madame Vespera before I ended up floating in one of those glass tanks. I packed my bags, I said my tearful goodbyes to my found family, and Raven and I shared one last desperate kiss. But just as I turned to leave, 3 sharp warning bells suddenly rang out across the grounds. My escape plan? Completely shattered in an instant. The police inspector was already there, blocking the exit. He accused me of being implicated in the disappearance of society gentlemen, Vespera's victims, obviously, and demanded I accompany him to the Clockwork Interrogator. As the officers surrounded me, I looked back at Raven. His hand was casually resting on his concealed knife, but subtly, he tapped 2 fingers against his thigh, the carnival signal for an imminent distraction. The authorities thought they had just captured a runaway socialite. They had absolutely no idea what kind of storm they had just walked into. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. When the gears of fate finally stop turning, which cage will you choose? The gilded cage of society's expectations, or the mechanical labyrinth of perilous freedom? My story, suspended right here on the edge of the blade, reminds us that sometimes the only way to true liberation is to risk tearing the whole machine apart. Thank you so much for stepping into my world today for this explainer. To see exactly how Raven's distraction unfolds, and if we survive the interrogator, you'll just have to dive deeper into the source material. Until next time, keep questioning your reality.